I'm Todd, and I was naughty. I did everything wrong. I got kicked out of art school, I drank heavily, and I looked to other religions and versions of spirituality to get fulfilled. The problem was, I was in the occult and I didn't even know it. My life was a wreck, and I had to learn what it meant to have a relationship with Jesus.
And I'm Laura. I was super nice. I did everything right. I got saved young, went to Moody Bible Institute, got married, and followed the Christian rules to having a good life. The problem was that formula didn't work. I had to change how I related with Jesus.
At the end of the day, what I learned is the very simple truth. Jesus is the answer, and the only one that will ever actually fulfill you.
Naughty
versus
nice.
And welcome back to Naughty versus Nice, of course. I'm Todd.
And I'm Laura.
And with us always is my lovely darling wife.
Hello.
Producer Kelly.
Why do I always have to be? Can I just be Kelly?
You can, I guess. I don't know. I just feel like, you sound like official and titly and stuff. Is this super cool? No?
No.
How you could be my hot, sexy wife, Kelly. What's up?
Don't do that. Please don't do that.
I'm a little uncomfortable.
We're all uncomfortable.
So we're going to do another question episode today. And so Laura and I are doing a series. We're talking about divorce and biblical divorce. And you might think that that's an oxymoron, but as we're going through this, we're also going to be doing some supplemental episodes and just kind of answering general questions, just kind of talking about the subject a little bit more in depth, not quite so structured, a little bit more loosey-goosey. So Kelly's going to be asking us some questions, and we'll just kind of give some free-flow, free-form answers to these things.
All right, so for this one, I just Googled like the top 10 Bible questions or the top 10 divorce questions Christians have. So let's start it off.
Wait, are we going to start at number 1 or number 10?
I'll start where I want to start.
Oh,
I'll probably jump around and forget where I went and then be like, no, I already read that one. All right. What biblical grounds allow for divorce?
That's super complicated.
I just poked Laura's button.
Well, first of all, let's all think about, where'd the word grounds come from? This is a legal term from our society, right? Because there's no place in the Bible that says these are the grounds by which you may get divorced. I don't like that word. But if I'm going to use it, the thing I think is interesting is I will sit down with a woman and she has discovered that her husband has committed adultery. I'm just using a cumulative example. This is not one person. And she is hurt and he's not remorseful, and there's this other woman and everybody is appealing for her to get back with him. And if he turns a corner and he says he's sorry, then it seems that a lot of counseling will say, well, you've lost grounds. So she had a situation where he was having an affair, then she confronted it, and he then comes back and he's sorry, and now the grounds are gone. But I kind of pictured the sin that leads up to this conflict as a ribbon, and if a spouse cuts the ribbon, that's it. At that point, she has, quote, grounds to end the relationship. It doesn't change if he's sorry or not. That's my one ground side note. As far as what are biblical allowances, we just went into that when we recorded. So,
well, and here's the thing: to use that example that you're talking about, it's he cuts the ribbon, so now she has grounds, and then the church says, well, when he comes back and he puts the ribbon back together, now she doesn't have grounds anymore. It's like, well, no. She would be the one that
But
would...
apologizing is putting the ribbon back.
Right. Oh, I'm so sorry.
The offended party, biblically, the offended party has the decision.
It would be more correct in that analogy to say she has to be the one to put the ribbon back together, and then that it would be indicative of the indication of commitment in order to move forward and put things back together. It's not the church saying he said he's sorry, he put the ribbon back together, therefore you have to X, Y, and Z now. On top of that, I would even go one step further. What we do find overall is that it's someone leaving the marriage, for lack of a better way to put it. That's a very blankety, overarching statement, but that's gonna cover infidelity. That's gonna cover I'm not working and taking care of the family anymore. That's gonna cover whatever the woman's obligations and responsibilities are within the marriage if roles are decided, that she's a stay-at-home mom and going to do homeschooling, for example, and that he's going to be the one that goes exterior of the home in order to do work, and that's the agreement that goes on within that marriage. If she no longer is doing the homeschooling or not doing the homeschooling correctly, however that shows up, she's not taking care of the obligations and responsibilities that go on inside that home in those walls. That's another example of her leaving the marriage. It's not just through infidelity. It's not just through a physical, psychological, or emotional abuse. It can just be, I'm not participating anymore. So I would even open it up even further. I'm open to having conversations regarding that. I'm not saying that's for absolutely everybody. This is obviously, we're talking divorce, so it's a smaller percentage of marriages that are not healthy. And then in that smaller percentage, we're talking about marriages that are unhealthy that can be put back together. These are the ones that can't, because the decisions made, a behavioral personality disorder is involved, or quite frankly, someone is just a wolf in sheep's clothing, been faking being a believer, and their heart's not in it. So that's kind of an overlying look of it.
And something else, and we were talking about this between breaks, between recording, is I don't see, and I'm willing to be corrected, I don't see that the Bible gives the church authority over marriages. That's how it was discussed for me. I find myself discussing it that way, like, well, the church says this. We are not a cult. We have leaders who can advise. So I do not believe a pastor should be saying, you need to do this, or you don't need to do this, or you can, or you can't. I think they can offer counsel. And I think if they have been deserving of your respect for their authority, if they have earned that and through proven character, then you can listen to that, but you are not under that. That's not your decision-making factor. That was huge in my case. I had 13 or 14 different people talking into my case, and I felt they all had some kind of spiritual authority about whether I could or could not file for divorce. Looking back, I'm like, why did I think that? That's not what authority is supposed to look like in the church. I don't think that pastors have that kind of, nope, you can't do it or you can. And that is how it's being spoken about.
Well, I've even seen authority spoken about in the church, and the idea, well, God appointed so-and-so 15 years ago to this position, therefore you can't even question the fact that they're currently in it today, and should they be removed or somebody else be in that position, something, that's not, I would argue, every single week, every single day, they have to, for lack of a better way to put it, prove that they are properly placed, have the responsibility, are taking it seriously, and are honoring and putting God first, and being the good shepherd, looking after the sheep, and doing it in that way. And that's, I feel like, a minute by minute proof that that's going on. It's tireless, it's thankless, it's endless. It probably sucks in many ways, but it's also very good. And if you're called to do that, then that's the burden of leadership. Sorry, but that's what it is. Not, God appointed me 15 years ago, I can do whatever I want, and you can't question me. Nope. Probably a cult.
And I realized the question was, what are the biblical grounds? So I do want to speak to that really fast.
Just off the rails. Yeah.
Everybody will go to, I think it's Matthew, I want to say it's 16, and they'll say, well, Jesus says, except for adultery, no one can divorce. And then Paul says that only for physical abandonment can you divorce. But nobody seems to ever go back, and we did in our last episode, go back to the Mosaic law in Exodus 21, where God has given provision for divorce for situations of neglect and abuse. And so I think that we're going to next episode deal with the two that are given, that people think are given, which is the very black and white, only adultery and only for physical abandonment. And I kind of want to pry those open and see what was really going on culturally when those things were said, that isn't the only answer. That's my answer.
Thank you for
meandering.
for coming back to the grounds.
I do my best.
All right. How should I approach reconciliation before considering divorce?
Sorry. I think everything should be case by case, careful stepping, careful processing, unless you're in a situation of threat. Then the answer is always get out. If there's even a question on the table, I don't know if I'm unsafe, you aren't. Get out. What's the harm? If at one point you felt unsafe and you left and your spouse proves to be no threat, you've not harmed anything. There's only harm if you stay, and you shouldn't. So I would say you get out as soon as possible in those situations. With reconciliation, I think if that's something you want to try and you want to make sure you've exercised that out to its full extent so you can feel confident you've really tried to save your marriage, that you should do so while living separated. There should not be physical dwelling together. You need space and time to figure things out. And I would advise maybe marriage counseling, but separate counseling for sure, and take that time. And if it's over behavioral issues, they don't get back in the house for a year. I don't care how sorry. I don't care how changed. If you really, really change, your change can hold up for longer than a year. And so if you are dealing with situations like what I have dealt with, so I'm dealing with more extreme situations, you can pursue reconciliation, living apart, and I think there should be a time limit on it of a year. The law in at least our state allows for a year before you have to make a decision about what you're going to do, if you're going to continue separation or divorce. So I think that's how you pursue it. Did that answer the question?
I think that when you're dealing with normal people in a normal marriage where there's some unhealthy behavior or a misunderstanding, you're all correct on everything. I'm going to draw a hard line on this, though. When you're dealing with somebody with a psychological disorder, a behavioral disorder, you're dealing with somebody that is other, that is not a normal person who's having trouble, struggle, difficulty. Dad, beat me too much when I was a kid, and it's coming out in a negative way, but I can get better and I want to. I'm talking somebody who hardline behavioral disorder. There is no reconciliation. There is no therapy. There's no nothing. Okay, that's the hard line that I would talk about with this. What you're talking about is normal people, extreme situation. They can put it back together. It's going to take a lot of work and a lot of effort. When you're talking narcissist or psychopath or sociopath, there is no reconciliation. I'm telling you flat out right now. And I'm fine for people to tell me I'm wrong on this. I will have that conversation. There's no amount of therapy in the world. There's no amount of crying in the world. There's no amount of... They don't feel the same way you do. Get out.
When we went through divorce, I don't know if it's this way in every state, but you have to go through a co-parenting after divorce class. And you can request to do it separately, which I did because I didn't feel comfortable with being in the same room. And, they're giving all this good advice, how to be respectful, how to be this and that. And I went up to the guy at the break time, and I said, listen, this is the 5-minute version of what I went through. This is what I think I'm dealing with. I think it's a personality disorder. And he said, I want you to listen carefully. Everything we've said, you disregard. You draw whatever distance you can between your children and yourself and that person. And no, you don't have to follow any of these rules, because he said, if you've got a personality disorder diagnosis, we're done. That doesn't get turned around. That was a counselor who said that to me.
That's the hard line.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And it's recognized. Yeah. So.
And I think that makes people largely uncomfortable when I have that conversation in the church, but they aren't sitting in the room as you're looking at a woman who is so terrified, they're shaking, and they're so afraid he somehow knows what we're talking about, and he's not there. I mean, it's not even possible he knows we're talking about it. They won't set up a separate account with me, like a way to communicate. They're terrified, absolutely terrified. This guy has reigned in the home for 15 years by just absolute terror. And people are like, well, you're going to tell her to end it? Yes, I'm going to tell her, and I will not change my mind. You get out, I will 100% back you up. And no, there is no reconciliation thing going on. You can get out now.
Well, I think some people, they don't take into account what reconciliation actually means, which is two parties working together to reach the same goal. You're both moving, you're both changing with the common end goal in mind. And in a lot of situations, like, well, I have to reconcile. But the other person's like, okay, reconcile is you will only see things my way. You only do things my way. That's not reconciliation. Mm-hmm. So we need to start defining that out more per case, as you say.
Always a case-by-case basis.
Yes. All right, final question.
Oh, final.
What are the implications of divorce on my relationship with God and the church?
I think God's going to be a little more forgiving than the church will be. I can tell you that much.
Oh, that's a good answer. I don't know how to top that one.
I don't know, based on everything I've seen,
So I think I've said before, I felt like there were people who said, you're going to be accountable for this. There was almost like there's a special judgment line in eternity where those who are divorced are going to have to wait a little longer and not be fed as much. I don't know. It's just you're under stricter condemnation. And I think we've done a good job, at least in the episodes we've done so far, to outline that is not the case. That I believe, we've given the illustration before that in these horrible situations that women are in, that Jesus is in the corner wringing his hands, kind of hoping things will work out because he really just wants to put this covenant back together. I think it's justified to believe that the countenance of Christ would look much like the clearing out of the temple in those situations, as you have a man raping his wife and the church saying, let's put this back together. I think Christ would have a far different reaction, and I think he stands in front of the woman saying, I desire for the church to intervene and protect this woman. So that is how I think God sees it in those situations. Even if you have a milder situation where things just did not work out and the relationship just became something that would not be healthy anymore, you have a position in Christ that defies every circumstance, every behavior, every emotion, every opinion. That cannot be changed no matter what. So no, being divorced cannot change the affection of God for you that he finds in his Son. The church is largely uneducated in what the approach, that they don't understand divorce from a biblical perspective. They're afraid to look at difficult marriage situations. They're very uncomfortable with advising divorce. So when you do make the decision to be divorced, you may find that you get treated differently. I've had women say they've been in churches where that's not the case. So that's not everyone, but it has been my experience. So I can only speak to that. That I was not ostracized, but there's an uncomfortableness with it. There has been some hesitancy for me to be in leadership. So those are some things that you can kind of expect.
Divorce in most churches today seems to also be kind of synonymous with the idea of having kids. Kelly and I, we don't have kids. So we become other. We are not quite, oh, nice. Okay, you're coming too. It's more like that. You're not really a real person. You're not really included. You're not really thought of. You become more like a power windows, not the car. You're a feature, not the thing. You're kind of in the body, but you're not really in the body. It's something like that. And I think there's a parallel that happens with that. It's not quite the same thing. I don't think we're treated with disdain as much as it's kind of a general, I don't know how to interact with somebody. You're supposed to have kids and you don't. I don't know how to manage that. It's more like that uncomfortability that they experience kind of gets projected onto you. Whereas, you'll have a single woman who's 35 in the church and she's never been married. Nobody knows how to talk to her. Nobody knows how to treat her like a regular person, or even somebody who's divorced. There's this weird few different categories that are like this. You can kind of lump them into one category of it's other, it's aberrant, it's not the way it's supposed to be. God said you're supposed to go out and be fruitful and multiply. If you don't have kids, you're disobeying God, despite whatever your circumstances are. There's this underlying theme or something that kind of goes with that. That all being said, the idea that God somehow is disappointed in you, you're already born in sin. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not saying it's okay, and I'm not saying it should be your first option. I'm just saying I don't think that's the hard line. There's a lot of other parts of it that are all into the complicated milieu of what it is to have that relationship with God. Will your relationship be damaged with God because you got divorced? I don't know, as much as maybe interacting with porn is, as much as maybe punching your wife would do. There are all these other things that go along with it too. Why is this the thing that keeps getting singled out and all the other stuff acts like it's not that big of a deal or into the mix and it's kind of okay? It's because, once again, it's what people are comfortable with. People don't know how to interact with couples that don't have kids. Married couples don't know how to interact with people that are divorced. They don't know how to interact with that single woman who's 35 and never been married. They feel uncomfortable, and it comes out in that way. So that's kind of what I meant when I said, well, the church will be less forgiving than God. a little bit tongue-in-cheek, but that's there. That underlying aspect is definitely there, and it's a real and palpable thing. And for people that say things like, well, I don't think the church is mishandling problems in marriage. Okay, well, that's how I know you're either the problem in your marriage or your marriage is fine, or everybody's just living in denial and pretending like these things don't exist. You're acting like the human condition doesn't exist inside of church, which is the hospital for the human condition. Mm-hmm. It's this weird thing. So I don't know. Did that cover it?
Yeah, that's
a
it
wrap
for this week.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like I want to say more on that, and probably so I probably won't. Was that?
Bring us home, big boy.
Okay.
We're gonna end it awkward, like we started awkward.
Right? Yeah. Is that like our? That's like our. I want to say trademark. That's not the right word, though, right?
You mean you and I?
Our signature? No, I know. Just
A motif? No, that's not right.
now I want to go back in time. Let's
our
cut
brand.
and delete. It's our brand, right?
That's good.
Just clumsy and awkward, slightly goofy, but hey, at least it sounded okay. So if you have some thoughts on some of the questions that Kelly had asked and some ideas of how maybe you would answer it differently, or if you want to kind of back up what we were saying, or maybe give examples in your own church of things that are going on, or somebody that you know about, you can reach out to any of us through our email at naughtyversusnice, VERSUS, nice, @gmail.com. And we also have, of course, our buymeacoffee.com/naughtyversusnice webpage, where you can get detail or kind of additional breakdowns and our thoughts on different subjects that we cover throughout the week. And whenever I get my lazy buns in gear, we'll also have things like items like shirts and mugs and all sorts of other fun stuff. If you think that what you're getting here is of value and do want to support us, we would appreciate it. Feel free to get one of those items and put it in your cabinet, put it in your closet, and wear it with pride. Thank you very much for joining us.
And we'll talk at you later.